back. In our last episode, we breathed life into our app using state, making it reactive to user input. But currently, our apps are still just text and basic shapes. To build a modern, engaging experience, we need visuals. We need images. In Flutter, handling images generally falls into two categories, and it's crucial to understand the difference technically. First, we have network images. These are live on a remote server. Your app needs internet connection to fetch them. It stores it temporarily in a cache and displays it. They are dynamic, but they depend on internet connectivity. Secondly, we have asset images. They are images bundled directly into the application binary when we compile it. They increase the app size slightly, but they load instantly and are available offline. Think of things like logos, icons, or introductory graphics. While network images are easy, asset images require us to touch a file that intimidates many beginners, the pubspec.yaml file. We spoke lightly about this in our previous episodes. Today, we're going to master both types and demystify that configuration file. Let's start in the IDE with the easiest method, fetching an image from the internet. I have a basic scaffold set up here from the previous episode. Now, I'll edit this to remove a few things. For example, we don't need this floating action button. And instead of a text widget being centered, I want something called Image.network. Inside Image.network, you need to pass a source. Your source will usually be a URL of an image that's hosted somewhere online. So if you Google something and you can right click on it, you can click open in a new tab and you can copy the URL to get that image address. So I've simply Googled the logo for Flutter and copied its image address and I'll paste it here. So it looks something like this. And now when we run the app, you can see that the Flutter image that I copied from the internet shows inside our app. Now, this image will always be centered no matter the orientation of the app, but you can see there's a slight border. So this image did not come with just the logo, but it came with a border. Now, why is that? That is because this image's URL is a JPEG. So JPEG images will include this background. So make sure when you're copying image assets from the internet that you have a PNG file for logos. Because if you have a JPG file or a JPG URL, then you'll get this background. I don't really mind this. Another thing that you can do is resize this. So let's say I want this to be slightly bigger. Then what I can do is I can go inside the Image.network. I can add a comma and I can add a property. So I can add a property of width, maybe let's say 100. So if I perform a hot reload and go back to my application, the image has been resized. So you can customize the size and dimensions of your image using this. So since I'm assuming that our logo is a square image, then changing the width automatically scales the height. Or you could give width and height separately. So 500 would make it slightly bigger, so that looks much better. So let me explain what Image.network is actually doing here. We're using Image.network and all it requires is a string URL. I'm using just an example image to create a random placeholder. And when I run or reload the app, the image appears after a brief second. You'll notice that there's a small delay. So what is actually happening during that delay? Flutter makes an asynchronous HTTP request to that URL. So if you want to learn more about asynchronous and synchronous coding, you can look at more videos on the channel. It downloads the image data stream and it decodes that stream into image pixels. And then it proceeds to render the frame and it even handles basic caching for you automatically. But what if the user is on an airplane? The image won't be able to load. For vital UI elements, we need a robust offline solution. That's where Image.asset comes in. To use images stored on the device, we actually need to tell Flutter where they are first. So this brings us back to our pubspec.yaml file, which is also known as the project manifest file. Look at your project file structure. Way down at the bottom, you'll see the pubspec.yaml file. I already have it open over here. This is the file that holds your heart of your project's configuration. defines your app's name, description, SDK version, any third-party packages that you use, your assets, and so on. A critical warning before we touch anything. This file is written in YAML, which stands for yet another markup language, and it is extremely sensitive to your indentation. So if you add the wrong indentation, it will immediately throw an error. It does not use tabs for indentation, it actually uses spaces. So each indentation is 2 spaces, and if your indentation is off by a single space, your build will break. So follow along very carefully. Step 1 is organizing our files. So before we even enter the pubspec.yaml file, we need to create a directory in our project to hold our images. Now previously we made a directory called assets, and under it we made fonts. So if I want images, I can create a new directory and maybe call it images. Currently, I have nothing inside images, but let me just quickly move something into this folder. Conventionally, we create a folder named assets as the project root and often subfolders like images or fonts. Now, I've dragged a simple PNG logo into that new folder. Okay, the file is physically here, but Flutter does not know it exists yet. We must register it in the pubspec.yaml file. Scroll down about halfway. You're looking for a commented out labeled section called Flutter. Over here, we've already uncommented it in our previous episode, so you'll have something that looks like this. These specific lines are the lines that we need to uncomment. So simply press Ctrl/ to uncomment these lines and fix the indentation on those. After we've done that, notice that this Flutter is the parent, assets is indented 2 spaces, and the hyphens indicate a list item that is also indented another 2 spaces. The path inside must be exact relative to the project root. So our project root is my project, so the path for my image folder would be simply assets/images and logo.png. You can also register just the directory like assets/images/ and everything that's inside that directory will be directly loaded inside your Flutter app. But since right now we just need the logo PNG, it's much more efficient to do this way. When you save this file, your IDE should automatically run a command called pubget. Alternatively, you can click on this button that says pubget. After your process finishes with exit code 0, you're good. If you get an error, just check your spaces, check your indentations. Now, for the final step, to display this image. How do we actually display this image? It's pretty simple. We change our constructor from Image.network to Image.assets. Once we change it to Image.asset, you can remove this URL and instead give the exact path of the image that you want to load. So it is asset/images/logo.png. You can also add an optional controlling size like we did before, so let's do that too. And for this example, let me say width 200. If we run this program, that's my bad, it's called assets. Seems like I made a typo. Just double check your path if you're getting an error like that. So we ran this program and there it is. Our local asset loading instantly and ready offline. So once you compile your project, even offline, this asset is going to load. As I said before, you only want assets that you absolutely need to run even when offline to be able to register them without an internet connection. Most of your assets, however, will be hosted somewhere. It'll be online so that your Flutter app itself isn't all that heavy. There we go. To recap today's episode, we learned about network images, asset images, your directory structure, and your pubspec.yaml. So making dynamic web-based images, using bundled offline images for your logos, creating assets folders to divide your images and fonts into different folders, and updating your project manifest files. Now that we have text, we have state, and we have images, everything is stuck in the center of the screen. We have no control over layout yet. So in the next episode, we're finally going to take control of the canvas. We will dive deep into layout widgets, specifically the container, padding, and margin. These are tools that you need to position elements exactly where you want them. See you there.